Okay, so what I'm going to present is some of the results, or actually the recommendations from the co-production study that we've just completed. It was, I mean, the projects and Mistra Urban Future has been evaluated during this first phase, but there was something missing in those evaluation where there has been a lot of focus on results. So the purpose of this study was kind of to collect the lessons learned about co-production processes, to take those lessons further into the second phase of projects. And we have made interviews with project participants in 6 projects that you see here. And we've used a action value attribution framework developed by Hellström in the co-production book that I'm sure that all of you have read, right? The action value attribution framework is basically an evaluation framework where you let the participant determine the values and the actions that lead up to those values. The idea with this framework is not to have someone coming from outside and looking at the project. The idea is actually to have this done by the project continuously, to learn as a tool for formative evaluation. And that is one of our proposals and recommendations, is that to have some kind of more systematic learning about co-production processes throughout the project phases, and also to have this done between the projects. And we've also developed the model. When I read the Hellström chapter, I came across this model and it didn't say anything to me because I'm not a model person. I mean, what it says is not the important thing, it's the model. So what he did was, in these first squares, he placed the activities that are important, and in the second one, he places the values that these activities will lead to. And it didn't, say anything to me when I read it first. I just skipped it. Then, after I've made all the interviews, it made perfect sense. This is, of course, what we need: a very clear visualization of how these things are linked. And so, what we have done is that the lessons from And the purpose is not to have a final model, but that this can be used and developed throughout the project. So what we've done is we've put in red our additions to this model, and it can be used as a point of departure for the projects to continue to build on, and for internal formative evaluations. So the main conclusions from the study is that quality of process is about learning, emergence of new understandings and perspectives, new networks and collaborations, and new ways of working. That is what, according to the participants, a quality process is. And such a quality process leads to usable results. But usable results are not always used, as you all know. So we've also tried, to some extent, to focus on impact. And the process and impact parts are, of course, interwoven. You need to work with impact continuously to have, throughout the process, to actually create the lasting relations that are important for some kind of sustainable change. But for analytical purposes, we have separated these two to look at the recommendations we make. We first have some main recommendations, and that is to support quality processes rather than results. Because if we decide that there are certain results that we are after, that may cause a lot of problems. We govern the processes too closely in order to achieve the results that we want to, and therefore we lose a lot of creativity. But there's also a risk that we invest in projects that will lead to results. And as I will come back to very briefly, certain projects and certain results are more easily having an impact in the organizations, because there is the right climate, they are on the agenda, they are more growth and infrastructure oriented, while other results may have more difficulties having an impact. When they are focusing on social inequality, for example, it might be more difficult. So if we are looking for impact only, we might steer our projects away from difficult and sensitive issues. But of course, there is also a need to increase effort to enable impact throughout all project phases. And there is also a need for increased learning about what makes results and projects have an impact. And very important, make evaluations part of internal processes and improve learning on method. So a strong recommendation is that formative evaluation and reflection on learning and co-production processes are integral to the project, but also that there is an increasing conversation between projects on the lessons learned, the difficulties, challenges, etc., to actually move forward on these issues. And then we have some specific recommendations regarding process. We need to think early on to make sure that there is stable funding. I don't think that that's a problem perhaps for the second phase, but it was to some extent a problem in the first phase. There's a need to move up the co-production process. There's a sense in some of the projects that there's a gap between, that the co-production in the project is kind of done in a bubble and doesn't really relate up to the center. So there's a desire for more co-production on that level. There's a need for early and continuous reflections within and between projects on many issues, on expectations, on methods, etc. You will have to read the report for the details. Take care with selection of participants. Who participates is important to make sure that there's a good mix. It's not necessarily important that there is always one person from academia and one person from practice in project leaderships. It is how cooperation is done within the project that is important, and how you take in different types of knowledges. It may also be a bigger problem if there's only one academic in a project, and that there is no theoretical discussion within that project, for example. It's a challenge that a lot of practitioners quit their jobs and go do something else. So there's a problem with continuity of participants that, I mean, we can't keep people in their jobs, but there might be, some thinking about what do we do when that happens, and how do we introduce new participants in an efficient way. Specific goals cannot be set too early. It's a bit self-evident. Improve methods for giving experience-based knowledge due attention. There is, of course, even though we don't want to, a hierarchical relationship between the academic knowledge and the practitioner knowledge, and we need to work with that. With different methods, but also reflections on that. We need to develop forums to support continued activities after project has ended. It doesn't mean that the center necessarily have to continue to support financially projects, but maybe the platform can be developed to create meeting places for projects that have ended, and to nurture networks, etc. Find new ways to enable mobility of people between academia and practice. There are sometimes regulatory and administrative obstacles to that, so try to make that easier. Increase the use of students in projects, and to measure project outcomes in terms of, and what I took out here was not in terms of number of workshops and number of, number of types of activities, because they don't say anything about the quality of them, but in terms of new questions, new perspective, networks, and learning. Impact. Here we have a big challenge. Projects need to be grounded on all levels, high up to have a mandate, but also by those who are going to implement to actually make sense for people who worked with the issues. Instead of having, or maybe complementary to having events to spread information, it's really important to build and establish lasting relations between the organizations, so it doesn't become one-time events, but something that happens over and over. Improve and use methods for early implementation. This is also connected, right, to making the knowledge of the practitioners having a greater role, because if you start early on to test and learn by doing, that will give the practitioner knowledge, greater importance in the project, and some projects already do that. Improve receiving capacity in organizations. Time, resources, possibilities for reflection, but also competence. Open the door to the political level. This is, of course, a difficult issue, but it comes up over and over again. And pay particular attention to issues considered ideological. This is the same thing that I talked about before, that we shouldn't avoid certain issues because they are not possible to advocate as they are considered ideological, but we maybe need to discuss and find new ways. Share learning between projects on how to have impact. Allocate time for writing academic articles if we want to make sure that those are written. And continue experimenting with accessible output. And there is more detail to come on this. That will be presented in the report, but I'm also at the moment conducting interviews with the coordinators in the coordinating group to look at more at the specifics of the obstacles to impact, but also potential gaps between coordinating level and project level. Okay.